Thank you so much to be here, Toni Boucher. I was visiting Toni last year in America, in South Carolina, in Charleston, and she has a community around teens and also adults, and it was all about this vast spectrum of autism. And for me, it was like I was there 10 days, almost 2 weeks, and sharing with the kids, with the teens, with the adults. It was like, for me, a new world opened. To listen to them and my body language and to speak with them, for me, it was very enriching experience. And so today I wanted to invite Toni, the creator of this center. And also I want you to show, she wrote a book, Autism Translated, Toni Boucher in South Carolina and Charleston. And here I got her today for a little, a little interview or podcast. And we want to dive a little deeper into this whole, let's say, not just the book, but also her life story and why she wrote the book. And yeah, here I go to introduce you, Toni Boucher. Hi, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this for a while now.
Yes, yes. Toni, tell me how was your life? Like how were you drawn into autism and writing your book? What was your story behind that?
Yeah, I think starting out as a girl, I was very unusual. I didn't realize that. I thought everybody was like me, as we do sometimes when we're kids, but I had a very difficult time tapping in and connecting with the physical reality. I didn't know where my body began and ended. I would hyper focus on little things in the world, like taking seeds or staring at little items for hours that really intrigued me and really tapped me into the beauty of the universe. So I was very much a child in this world of my own that wasn't connected to the physical things that were going on in
Mm.
in in day-to-day life. And so fast forward to high school, I became fascinated with a class I learned about people who were autistic. And I remember learning what the experts at that time were telling me about them. And while it was fascinating to me, I really was questioning some of the things that they said. And as I graduated from high school and then started volunteering at an organization that served folks on the spectrum, I was able to really tap into my relationship with these people that I was supporting and see how the conventional wisdom about these people was all wrong. There was a lot of discussion at the time about how these are people who don't want to have connections with others. These are people who don't care about other people. And intuitively, I was having these very connected, beautiful relationships with these people and knowing that this is not true. And so fast forward a few more years, and I was hired to evaluate folks on the spectrum and do consultations with families to help support families of autistic family members. And I just began to go deeper and deeper connected with these folks. I just understood them very well. And at some point, we were checking on fidelity for our assessment tools, and we were supposed to use our neurotypical children to compare to the autistic children that we were evaluating. And so I used my daughter, and she kept coming up red flags on the assessment. Everything was very clearly leading towards perhaps she was neurodivergent. And so we had her evaluated, and Indeed, she was not neurotypical. She's a very unique, original soul. And so that kind of got me thinking then about my own path. And as I was working with a married couple who was needing help with their relationship, they told me, you should write a book, Toni, because we've been to marriage therapy for years and we didn't get anywhere. And all of a sudden you're working with us and we've made this amazing progress. We understand each other, things are working out better. So I was like, okay, I'll write a book about autism. The husband, the spouse was autistic, and so were their children. And so I started writing this book, Autism Translated, that you shared. And as I got into writing the book, I started having flashbacks to my childhood, experiences of being that little girl who is not playing with other children on the playground, staying off to the side. Um, Thinking about those years when I would stare at seeds or bumblebees for hours and would stim in many different ways. And so I was like, I started to really have these memories come back to me. And I was like, well, no, that you're just confusing things. You're not being objective here. So I shoved it aside until one day some of my colleagues had been asking me for years to go to the beach to do something called Surfers Healing, which is a beautiful program where they get autistic kids on the surfboards out in the water to experience the water and experience surfing. And for years I had said no because I have a lot of sensory issues in the water and at the beach. And so finally I was like, you know what? I've said my last no, like I don't have any other good excuses. I'm going to go this year. So I brought my youngest child, who was like 2 years at the time, and we went to the beach, and I didn't wear shoes. It was like 110 degrees, on the sand. It was burning up. I was in jeans. I hadn't like prepared myself for this experience. And my son kept pulling me towards the water, wanting me to be in the water. And so um, he pulled me in, and right away I had a huge overwhelm of pain in my feet as the water and the sand and the seaweed kind of brushed across my feet, and I froze. And at that moment, I looked around at these hundreds of children, autistic children, who were running around, and they were laughing and they were smiling and they were playing. They were all happy. And I was like, I'm shut down and I am the most autistic person here right now. I'm having the most difficult time dealing with things. And so my colleague went and took my son, and they played in the water, and he had a wonderful time with her. Um, I went home and reached out to a colleague at that time in Great Britain who evaluates adults on the spectrum, and that I think I need to look at this for me. And so we went through that process of um, me gathering all my information and sharing with her. And she confirmed, yes, you definitely are very much an Asperger's
Mhm, mhm.
profile. And so what had been my professional work then became, you know, my work for me, finding ways to utilize what I had been working on with my clients to improve my life so that I could go to the beach and not melt down if I chose to, or I could choose in some cases, like going to the grocery store, to have somebody else do that for me because it's not an environment that brings out my best. And so allowing somebody else who loves to do groceries and giving that to them allows me to be freed up to do something that I do well, like the community center.
You just mentioned something very key, very important, like the sensory input. Certain areas or shopping centers or supermarkets, knowing even for parents who have kids or even like for us adults, that certain spaces with the lights and with the variety of colors or noise or sounds, it really, oof, no, it's like overwhelming. And sometimes we don't know what's going
Yes,
on, but
yes,
just listening to you, it's like, okay, in certain areas we get overwhelmed, or we have to take care or nurture ourselves, or maybe avoid or do that someone else is doing this kind
Exactly.
of work.
Exactly. And it's interesting, like when I was younger, I just learned to force it all in. So I felt this sense of like out of body. And so I just held on real tight, like I would tense up, like literally physically tense my muscles. Um, and I would ignore if some sort of sensory input was overwhelming or painful. And so, as an adult now, I've learned to really tap into that and really understand it. But yeah, if there are folks out there who are having meltdowns or avoiding certain situations or environments, it could be that they're feeling a sensitivity towards that environment. And I think the beauty of that is if somebody's sensitive to an environment, we really should be asking the question, is it an environment that's good for anybody? And sometimes the environments that we put ourselves on are not really good for us. I don't think that fluorescent lights are good for people. Getting out in the sunshine is. Now, that doesn't mean that, there are lots of people who are sensitive to the sunshine as well, but it's a good question to be asking. If an autistic person is sensitive to something, maybe we need to evaluate, is this actually a good thing for us? I think we are canaries in the world because of our sensitivities. And so it's just a good question to ask.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like especially like also I have met some, some parents here in my area where I live here in south of Spain who have autistic kids.
Mhm.
And just speaking with you, and I can see sometimes it's very difficult for parents because they have to understand, their child on a more sensitive, way, which
Yeah.
environments are healthy, which environments are kind of, like taxing, for the
Yeah.
system.
Yeah.
And it's a learning, this
It's a
continuous
learning.
learning.
It's also for parents difficult because there are certain societal pressures that
Hmm.
say your child has to do these things. They have to go to this school and sit and function in this environment with these lights and this many people around, and have to go to the grocery store. They have to go here and there. And it's expected from our society. And so for parents to tap into what their children's sensitivities are, and then to be able to go ahead and say, it's okay, my child needs something a little bit different. That's hard for parents to do because there's all of that expectation about what is a good parent, what is a good parent expecting of their children, what is, and how do you balance and mitigate that? So it's a real challenge
Yeah.
for parents to
Mm.
figure that out and navigate it, and then give their children the permission they need to maybe go take a break instead of sitting at the dinner table for the entire time, or instead of having Christmas lights and packages that open, maybe doing gifts a different way, because maybe that crinkling of that paper is overwhelming and it hurts that child's ears. So yeah, anytime we have behaviors that concern us, I think we need to be asking the question, um, is there possibly a sensory issue with this? Or is there a communication breakdown? Because specifically when we're talking about autistic people, we have social communication challenges, and we have sensory issues, and we've got anxiety. Um, and so asking that question uh, really helps us not punish a child then, but figure out what is the underlying root cause of the issue, and then we can adapt our environment or adapt our approach accordingly. It's a very loving then way to approach these differences.
I totally agree. I remember these 10 days in your center with the kids and even with some parents. It was for me this eye-opening because it was like a new learning, to listening, to move with them, to understand, to sit with them, sometimes to ask questions, giving a little pause, or maybe go a little out in the nature and coming back and give them more space. It's and I can see the challenge for a lot of parents or adults, because like you say, the societal pressure, what is a good kid, what you have to do. So what is your experience when you work with, like with teens and the parents? What are you doing in your center? What is like a good approach to give, like, create the space for these people, that they're being heard or nurtured or understood?
The biggest piece is making sure that we create a space of community where neurodivergent folks of all ages can find each other and they understand each other. We don't have a lot of communication breakdowns when you put two autistic people together because we speak the same language. We have a lot of the same challenges. And so there's an understanding there. And you can feel very alone, very isolated if you are in a world where you don't have access to other people who are similar to you. So that's the first thing, is really making sure that people of all ages have that access and they're not feeling like they're alone. But then I think the second piece of it is really, rather than looking at behaviors as being oppositional, defiant, or as behaviors as being something that's, this child is trying to get under my skin and irritate me, or they just don't want to do things. It's not really that, or they're lazy. It's that they're wired differently, and the environment that they're in is not really conducive to bringing out their potential in the best way. So if we can go at things understanding, okay, if I've told my child 10 times to do something and they haven't followed through, do they understand what I'm saying? Are they having executive function issues to, organize that? Did they forget? Are they so focused on this other kind of spiritual world, or hyper focusing on something else, a special interest that they didn't hear, or they just, it hurt, went in one ear and out the other? Uh, it's really important to understand the root cause and not to put a label of defiance or refusal or wanting to get under your nerves, because in my experience, that's not what it is. It's 9 times out of 10, it's some other issue that if we address that, for example, if you have a child who has executive function issues, instead of just telling them 10 times, make a list that they get to check off. It can sometimes be something as simple as, adapting a tool or an environment to make it easier. At the community center, we worked it out so it's very sensory friendly. We have very soothing colors. It's not very busy. We have lots of comfortable things like weighted blankets and pillows. And we have dim lights that can be lifted up or down. We don't use the fluorescent lights that came with with the space. And so we really give people the space there to feel comfortable. Did that answer your question?
Yes, yes, yes. And I also remember, like you really invited people to be creative,
Mhm.
or I
Mhm.
remember, was it Hannah, writing her book, or, being inspired to write her story or her book, and that is also what I saw, like not just you as, the principal, person there, but also between them, like
Yeah,
really, hey, what are you doing? Can I help you? And there was really this kind of companionship.
yeah, and collaboration between people. We really, so the community center is a maker space. We've got machines and computers and art supplies and tools so that people can come and try things out and explore them. And they can either choose to do those things as hobbies, or if they want to monetize something like writing a book or creating crafts or arts, they can come there and do that with the idea that their other community members are there to help support them. One of the things that the community members are working on right now is making sure that everybody gets up and moves and exercises and rehydrates and eats properly, because one characteristic of this neurodivergent brain we have is we could sit for 12 hours on something we're interested in, never go to the bathroom, never eat, never move around. And so that's not very healthy.
Yeah.
So they now have a system where they text each other, they remind each other to get up and do their stretches, they remind each other to hydrate.
Mm.
And so there's an internal kind of support system there for those things that are specifically needed for each of those individuals who,
Mm.
participate.
Yeah. And that was also the beauty because, the parents came, stayed a while with the kids. Maybe they came back later. And I had also the time to speak with the parents. It was like, like just the whole challenge, like a whole lifestyle change, for parents. How do you help parents in that whole process? Yeah.
I think, the biggest thing is to help them see the beauty of their children. A lot of what we see when we talk about neurodivergence is pathology. We turn this into something that's wrong with the person. And that's the message the parents get. And if the parents, go about their lives with the child, trying to make them, trying to fix them, make them whole, make them, different or better, um, those kids grow up not having a core sense of authenticity and self and wanting to people please everybody. And then we get into issues when we try to force compliance like that, where people's are set up for exploitations, their money being taken, sexual abuses, being taken advantage of at work. So I think the big thing is to see the beauty and the characteristics as being different but equally valid. And that's really something I would like to talk about, is what some of those differences are and how those are so valid and really important and relevant for, the world that we live in today. So we don't want to squash those characteristics. We want to find ways to help incorporate them in a good way. And so just, to give you an example, I worked a lot of little kids when you're on a spectrum STEM by flipping light switches up and down. And okay, that's a little disruptive. It's not something that any parent wants their light switch, flipping up and down as much as the child likes it. But let's look at what that means to that child in terms of their qualities and characteristics, and then how can we shape that in a really healthy and good way. When a child's flipping that light switch, nothing that parent can do can redirect them. Okay, now that can be frustrating, but think about as your child grows up, that determination. At some point, can we harness that and allow that to go towards, for example, somebody writing a book or learning how to do some sort of a job that requires a lot of repetitive action. And so that light switch flipper is expressing some very beautiful characteristics, just albeit in a very kind of disruptive way at the time. So finding a way then to take those characteristics and skills that that person is exhibiting and plug them into a way that's beneficial for them and helps them to contribute to their overall environment. And that's a lot of what we do at the community center, is really find ways to take what a person is, what is inherently autistic about that person, and make it really work for them in our community, so that they can really come and contribute to the world.
Yeah, like you say, I love that, seeing the beauty in their special, let's say, condition, instead of seeing it like a pathological, like a illness. No, there's beauty in their way of being, and how to really, like foster
Yeah,
a different education, or,
yeah,
because you have to
yeah,
find the proper center. You have to change as parents, and there's definitely, like more extra time in this whole setup, that,
yeah.
your kid, grows, how you like, in a new way. Mm.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I remember taking a course by a spiritual leader several years ago. And he had us rocking back and forth, spinning around. He had us doing some guttural stems, like kind of chant sounds. And I had some really mixed feelings about that because part of me was recognizing that people were paying a lot of money to learn his strategies, which were ones that autistic people do day in and day out. And for the autistic person to rock back and forth or to with their voices or, whatever stems they do, that is pathologized. But in the spiritual realm, these are actually the strategies that are taught to help us tap into our spiritual essence. So part of that made me really sad because autistic people, they're there. They're grounded in that spiritual essence, and we're trying to pull them out. And yes, we have to learn to function in the physical world, but we don't want to do that at the expense of that already innate spiritual connection that is there. So some of the ways I see that happen, for example, are with eye contact. A lot of times parents and therapists are trying to get an autistic child or an adult to make eye contact. If I make eye contact, that's looking into somebody's soul. And there's so much data and information that my brain and that I'm processing that it's very overwhelming. And a lot of my clients will say, I can either make eye contact or I can listen to what you're saying. So, forcing somebody to do that when they're connecting on a spiritual level on an unspoken level with their reality, is really, I think, counterproductive. And language is another area where we really want to program our autistic kids and adults to communicate reciprocally in a physical kind of way. Well, language is an abstraction, and a lot of autistic people are better communicators in other ways. We have a lot of great artists who communicate through their art. We have folks who communicate through movement, through body language. We have folks who communicate through writing. And we have folks who communicate just by being still and energetic with each other. I've seen a lot of times examples of parents who are like, my child is still in parallel play and they're 15. And I'm like, I'm 53 and I still do parallel play and love it. And your autistic child will do parallel play the rest of their lives. We like just being in presence with other people. We're happy just sitting there, engaging on a quiet, peaceful, energetic level with others. And so for a parent or a therapist to try and force language, while that's necessary to function in the world, to dismiss that quiet presence or that energetic kind of communication that's taking place for the sake of language, that's a step back for a person. Like, to speak verbally is an abstraction of being in the moment. And so I think looking at these kinds of behaviors and actions that you see from a loved one on the spectrum, it's really important to really look at, what does it mean to that person to make eye contact, to be touched. Yeah.
For me, it was, like I said, these 10 days at your center, it was like a whole new understanding of, because I love to, with certain people, it was easier to make certain eye contact. With other people's, I just had to learn, okay, we're just talking and I can look somewhere else. It was all about, like, as me as an adult, like really learning to
Yeah.
adapt myself into
Yeah.
their worlds, like I
Yeah.
was invited into their world by
Yeah.
adapting, myself in a different way, in a new way.
Yeah. I love that idea of, coming into their world, because when you are neurotypical, when you're not autistic, the world has been created in a way that really plays to your strengths. And when you are autistic, the world does not play to your strengths. And so you are constantly having to adapt. It's like going into a different culture and living there all the time, speaking a foreign language, being in a culture that's not your own. And it's very exhausting. So, something, I talk about in the book, Autism Translated, go into your child's world, be there in their space. If they are, if they're quiet and they don't want to talk, they want to line up cars or they want to rock back and forth, enter their space and do things, mirror them, do what they're doing. There's a connection that happens when you stop feeling like you have to pull them out and make them different and just be present with who they are and where they are at that moment.
And thank you, Tony. Yeah, my gosh, what a vast world. The neurodivergent, with all these different nuances and differences, sometimes very subtle. Again, what can we give parents, especially some parents who might listen to this interview podcast? What can we give them, or like an advice? Because I'm sure some parents, they're more like, no, these kids have to do this, versus other, parents. Because I'm sure there's a lot of information out there, sometimes more traditional, sometimes more, like the new science. What is a good, like approach to help parents to find their right, settings?
Yeah. Okay, so one thing to recognize is that neurodivergent folks develop at their own pace. So if you're wanting to make sure that your child develops the skills and the tools to function, effectively in the world, which is actually parents' number one fear is my child going to be okay out there, right? Because are they ever going to be able to live on their own? Are they ever going to be able to, have a family, a job, take care of themselves? And that's what keeps parents up at night. And I mean, I've had sometimes parents, we joke about, I just want to be able to get set up so I can die, at some point. Like, I don't feel like I can do that because I'm worried about making sure my child is going to be okay. So it's important at that fundamental level to recognize that your child is developing at their own pace. They are not developing with their neurotypical peers. So neurotypical peer might be ready to drive at age 15, might be ready to go out in the world and go off to college or do things at a certain time. Autistic folks come into their ability to do something much later. A lot of times I work with a 20-year-old who emotionally is really only 5. And we would never send a 5-year-old out to drive. They're not equipped yet. But we expect autistic people all the time to go beyond what they're ready to do. So if you're seeing resistance from your child on doing a certain thing, then listen to that and pace the slowing, slow it down, pace it so that they're doing rites of passage, they are accomplishing tasks at a much slower pace. There is an autistic trajectory for development, and it's very different. And so we will set ourselves up as parents to fail if we expect our kids to keep pace with other kids. They will get there, but it's going to be over time, and it's going to be in a different way. The way that they learn to achieve those goals is going to be very different than what non-autistic kids are doing. I think that's really number one. It's like I liken it to if you plant an oak seed in the ground next to a parsley seed, the parsley, that herb, is going to germinate real quickly and grow up fast. The oak seed is going to germinate in the ground a lot longer before it grows up. But we don't fault the oak seed for not sprouting at the same time as the parsley. Parsley's parsley. It's an herb, it's its own thing, and it's perfect as it is. But so is the oak tree. So when you have a child who's on the spectrum, we need to allow them the germination and not fault them for not being ready to, to be out on their own, to manage their money, to get a job, whatever it is.
Yeah, I
When,
can definitely understand. Beautiful, beautiful. The example with the seeds. Like other, like a seed needs its proper time. Mm.
yes.
And I definitely see it also, like when I watch, let's say autistic children or teens, and in this area where I live or wherever I go, I love to observe people, the way they communicate, like couples communicate or parents to their kids, and also see these kids, with autistic, this divergent, and how sometimes I see how challenging it can be for parents. But also there's, I always say, hey, it's we all need to go through a lot of different experiences, and sometimes our kid is like, okay, we have to, like, how can I say, that parents have to dive a little deeper into themselves, maybe get to know a little themselves better to understand, their own child on a deeper level, like
Mhm.
a whole new rearrangement of adulthood, for parents have
Mm.
to, you know, mm, have to like kick in place. Mm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. When you understanding is really paramount. We
Mm.
cannot solve our issues, address our problems if we don't have right understanding.
Yeah,
If if you are thinking your child is um, being doing something to try to get under your nerves, but really it's the sound of um, the cars driving by that's hurting their ears, then we're not ever going to intersect and figure out what the issue is and come up with a way to address it. We have to understand each other.
yeah, 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 totally. It's a big work, especially also for you because you have three kids. Mm.
Mhm.
And so for you, it was not just writing the book and not just with your own story, but also with your kids. And how was that like, being a mom and
Yeah, I mean, all my kids are neurodivergent. Um, and it's, you know, in some ways, I mean, I grew up in a neurodivergent family. I mean, if you look at really dig in, you see that, my grandfather was neurodivergent. My father read my book and he was like, I think I might be autistic. And, it's there's a value in growing up in a family that's like you, because in certain ways, because we created kind of an autism friendly environment. Now there's a lot of dysfunction, it wasn't perfect, but there sometimes we do things and have an understanding that makes it easier, because we accommodate. um so that's one thing. So in some ways, having that understanding gives me permission as a parent to understand, um, and work within those, parameters that um, make sense to me and also make sense to my kids with our brains being wired the way they are. But I will tell you this, I make all the mistakes. Well, maybe not all of them, but I make a lot of the mistakes that parents who come to me and pay me to help them make. I'm human. And so it's different when you're in your own situation, and sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees. Sometimes I get impatient. Sometimes I miss something. Um, do I worry about my kids and, what's going to happen with them? Absolutely. I'm human, and I do all the human things that we do as parents. Um, so yeah, it's different when you're taking care of your own kids than when you're, as a professional helping other people. Um, but it definitely helps me to not judge. Nothing a parent tells me is, that they've done or thought.
yeah,
Can I ever judge? I get it. It's really hard being a parent, and it's even harder when you're, a parent to a child who's unique like that.
yeah, yeah. Like you say, coming back to the uniqueness of each child. Mm, mm,
Mhm.
mm, mm. What else do you feel like do we need to cover in this interview? are there certain areas you would like to, address?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Before we started, we had a little conversation of getting in touch with our inner child. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's important because I think that, just going back to the idea of forcing a child to do something that they're not quite ready for yet, we need to be, as humans, we really need to look in on ourselves and heal those inner wounds and deal with those parts of us that are still little kids. And um, that is really magnified or noticeable in the autistic community. We have lots of traumas, we have lots of anxieties, and we it doesn't help us to just shove that away and try to just pull up our pants and be adults. We've got to be willing to feel, to have whatever grief or sadness or loneliness or heartbreak that we're going to have. And autistic people, we feel feelings big in real spades. We have this interesting thing where sometimes we can shut off. A lot of us are good in emergencies because during the moment we can just shut off and be numb, but then we can be deeply, deeply empathetic. And I might hear something that happened in South Korea, and it might make me feel so much sadness and grief for those people that I just shut down because I don't see myself as separate from them. And most autistic people feel deeply connected, to animals and or other people. And so if something happens that's out there in the world, it can be very, very traumatic or upsetting to us. Well, some people can just be like, oh, that's somewhere else. That's not me. We can't do that. And so allowing us to tap into our feelings, which is something you're big in all of your work, is tapping into being okay with feeling whatever it is, and coming to terms with that. I think is really,
Mm.
really important. We have to be okay with our inner child.
Yes, yes, yes. The inner child we were speaking about before. No,
Yeah,
all these different layers. Layers sometimes we created in order to survive or
yeah,
in order not to get hurt. And now
yeah,
when we're adults, okay,
yeah,
you have to invest some time, money to
yeah,
undo, not to learn, to open again to feelings. And that's beautiful because the more we reconnect, the more we connect with other people. Mm.
yeah. Yeah, something I really love about your work that's very relevant for the people that I work with is to not reject any part of ourselves.
Mhm.
We have certain parts of ourselves that we really like. The independent, carefree person, maybe, or the person who looks out for other people. We have these notions of the parts of us that we really want to reinforce and the parts of us that we don't want to own. And in your work, you're very good at allowing people to come into a space where they own all of the parts of humanity and recognize that we have parts of ourselves that might feel uncomfortable, or maybe we don't want to recognize, or we think they're ugly or unlovable.
Mm, mm.
But when we reject that part of ourselves, which has a message for us, then we're rejecting a part of who we are. And so I love how you work with people on owning every aspect of
Yeah, yeah.
who we are
Mm.
humans.
Isn't it beautiful? And again, I didn't I never thought about becoming a therapist, you know. It was more about I was looking to heal my illnesses, psychosomatic illnesses, and then one step followed another step. And so that's the beauty also in life. No, like before we spoke, we don't know where we are in 5 years. Let's see, because we are still learning, growing, like this seed you mentioned before. Mm.
Mhm. Yeah.
And coming back, like just listening to you, I remember when I was in Charleston these 2 weeks, I did a couple of, little workshops. We did a yoga class with a couple of
Mhm.
your, kids or students, and then we did also a meditation, in the other settings. And I remember still, some young people like getting really excited about, going inside, feeling a deeper aspect or feeling deeper into the body. how important that is, the somatic work, the body work, the
Yeah,
feeling, the allowing yourself, the instead of always doing, there's also a
yeah,
being aspect.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's really important. A lot of neurodivergent folks, because we have so much chronic pain in our
Mhm.
lives from, just every normal stimulus that other people can shut out. Um, you know, Imagine, just the lights causing headaches, or when a semi truck drives by, I don't hear it in my ears. I feel it vibrating throughout my whole body and it hurts. So we tend to really get acclimated or not recognize. If you're in chronic pain, you don't recognize necessarily what that pain is because it's your baseline. And a lot of
Mhm.
times we get numb to our bodies, we shut off and we don't feel them. So really tapping into the body is hugely important. I remember when I first started doing the trauma work for myself, I touched my hands together and they were numb. I couldn't feel them. Um, and so really reconnecting with the body, allowing person to, feel and to give themselves, that feedback that they need, can really, really be powerful. If you've Just another tip for families, if you've got a kid who, that kid who like squeezes between the couch or is always bumping into things like a football player, or wrapping things, give them deep pressure if they want it, or teach them to give themselves deep pressure or joint
Mhm.
compression, going out and kicking a ball, or just even, doing this can give your body some really important feedback. um,
Great point. Thank you, Tony. So, for example, if someone wants to reach out to you, how to contact you?
So they can reach me at tonyboucher.net. The community center is at neurodiverse.com. And anyone can go and kind of get a flavor for what's happening at the community center there. And my personal website where I consult with individual clients is at tonyboucher.net.
Mhm.
Um,
Great. I will put that also in the description, in the podcast, in this video underneath, so people might reach out or
yeah.
even remember.
Yes. Oh, yes, the book. Thank you.
Uh,
Autism Translator. You can get that at Amazon or on my website. We also
yeah.
have the community center is on Facebook and Instagram as well. So
Mhm.
we would go to, we call it C4, or the Creative Community and Career Center for Autism. We
Yeah.
serve all neurodivergent folks.
Because I'm sure, sometimes it's maybe just one person, is
Mhm.
listening to us, and maybe it's just for that person reaching out to you and getting help
Yeah.
on a more holistic,
Yeah.
base level. Because I've seen your work. I love your work, Tony,
Mhm.
and all the students or the kids and families. Like really, it was for me. It was like yes, a new world was opening,
Yeah.
and like you said or mentioned before, this definitely this spiritual dimension. It was a
Yeah.
different, way to communicate, look at them, but still there was something spiritual,
Mhm.
like a deep connection, a deep understanding. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how to help parents, also to grow more in this spiritual connection with their kids
Mhm.
or maybe with other kids on that spectrum. Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. And as a parent, you may have a 15-year-old, you may have a 50-year-old that you're, um, still caring for. And you may have, you may be, I work with a lot of executives who've run multi-million-dollar companies or worked at multi-million-dollar companies and have been instrumental in doing lots of, things in the tech world, or, so it's not like it's just, autism isn't just about kids, going to school. We grow up, and many of us are in, all different kinds of careers, doing all different kinds of things. So the community, we really want to be expressive of that.
Mm. Mm.
Mm.
Yeah. And coming, what else is important to address, just in case we have addressed a good base, Um, of the spectrum, or are there any?
Yeah, I think, when we're talking about parents or folks who are, supporting a person on the spectrum, taking care of yourself is really important.
Mhm.
I think the best thing we can all do is be the best versions of ourselves. And there's a lot of, guilt that happens with parenthood or feeling like you're not doing enough. But your child learns from you, and being that role model is really important. If you wouldn't want your child to treat themselves the way you're treating you, knock it off. Be gentle with yourself. Give yourself the love and care, the peace to go and do something that nurtures you versus feeling like you always have to care for other people.
Yeah,
Um,
totally agree. Totally agree. It is so key. Even yeah, first, you know, be healthy or eat healthy, sleep enough, and take care of your emotions and mental state. And then it's so much easier to be with another person, to give, to hold the other person,
mhm, mhm.
sustain.
Yeah.
Totally
And
agree.
I recognize there, for some people that's easier than others. And some parents are dealing with really challenging situations. It does
Hmm.
get easier over time. People grow, people change. Um, but as much as you can, to the degree that you can take, that care for yourself, it's very important.
Yeah. And I just leave it like here, and like you mentioned that seed, like
Yeah.
again, like each person is a different seed. Each
Mhm.
person or each seed needs, a different time to blossom or to, and that's a so beautiful, example, because if you would see, okay, a certain seed, we just need to, like you said before, no judge, give space, where the kid, the adult can play and give the right environment and the tools, and yeah, it blossoms. Mm.
Mhm. Mhm.
Thank you, Toni. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge with me, with us here. Just before we say bye bye, is there anything else you would like to share? Maybe another example or.
I think allowing for emotional intelligence is very important. A lot of times families try to get their kids to do well in school, math, reading, writing, but there's not a lot of emphasis on emotional intelligence and on like basic life skills, like how to balance a checkbook, um, how to take care of your laundry, how to cook meals. And my adults, I work with a lot of adults, and one of the big things that they tell me is that they wish they had had more opportunities to learn the life skills and to develop the emotional intelligence. Um, so, having awareness of, oh, I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling anxious, or this is a joyful feeling. When I was a kid, I had happy and sad. That was it. And it took me well into my adulthood to recognize the breadth of other emotions. That is a challenge for a lot of neurodivergent folks. We struggle with that. So teaching the breadth of emotions, teaching how to acknowledge it in yourself, acknowledge it in others, um, is really
Mhm.
important. And frankly, 98% of what we learn in school in this moment in history is irrelevant to adults. It doesn't matter. So I would rather see a kid learning to regulate their emotions, learning how to manage their money, learning how to shop for nutritious foods, read labels, recognize what's right for them, than worrying about all this like book work, because it's not going to play out in their adult life the way that these um, essential skills are.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Learn your children already, like handle money, like you say, go to the store, read
Yeah,
labels,
yeah.
understand where we breathe this beautiful air, you know, and yeah, so many.
And
Mm-hmm,
just one other thing just tied into that.
mm-hmm,
Neurodivergent folks, we have a lot of special interests. We don't want to just know something superficially. If we are interested in something, we want to intimately and deeply know it. I'm into gems. I don't want to just look at a pretty rock and collect them. I like get with my little loop and look at all the different inclusions, and I want to know what the refraction is and how it cuts, and I want to like know everything about it and the history of like gathering that gem. And so when you need to teach something, if you can take that special interest, allow those special interests to grow, because those become careers. One of my special interests is autism, and people pay me good money to help them. So that has worked for me, um, to allow me to have a career that I love and feel really good in. Um, so foster those special interests. And if there are skills or things that people need to learn that are difficult, tie them into that special interest.
yeah,
Um,
totally agree
so
there.
that it's, that if they have to learn math, tie it into their interest of vacuum cleaners, tie it into their interest of cooking. And that will make the learning so much easier and so much more relevant to a person.
Totally agree.
Um,
Totally agree. See this again, the uniqueness, and maybe, yeah, like you say, it's germs. Maybe it's cooking, or maybe it's some, you know, like painting. But
mhm,
again, like, you know, like adults or society look at this special, you know, like talents, or
mhm,
yeah.
mhm.
I agree. I agree. Mm. Okay, Tony, thank you so much for our first like here interview podcast. Let's see if there are many more to come. And again, I leave all the details of Tony here in the video descriptions. Thank you so much, Tony. I will stop
Thank
here the
you.
recording. Bye. Mm.